Welcome to the Atom CTO podcast. My name is Bhairav Patel, and I'm here with my co-founder, Sam Noble.
Hello.
And today, as part of our demystifying series, we are going to be talking about proposals, RFPs. There's something that we do a fair amount of at Atom CTO. We create a lot of project briefs and we put them out to tender to different organizations. And I thought it'd be worthwhile us just talking a little bit about our methodology and how do you then pick, once you've sent out the proposal, how do you pick the right people? So, Sam, first question is, what makes a good proposal? What makes a good RFP?
I'd say a detailed RFP. And what does it mean to be detailed? There you need to be able to hand this to somebody and they should kind of understand everything at a high level and also understand what are the areas that need kind of more detail, which in a lot of the times at the RFP, you really need to understand what the business case is for this. What is the driver? What are you trying to achieve? The goals and objectives of this project, and to understand the bits that need to be fleshed out by the people who are responding to this.
Yeah, I think the analogy I like to use is building a house, right? Because essentially that's a similar thing that you do when we're building a platform. So you don't go to an architect and say, I want to build a house, right? Because they'll ask you a bunch of questions. Okay, how big? How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? Do you want a garden? Is there a garage? And you going to someone and saying, I want to build a house is not very helpful. But if you go to someone and say, I want a 3-bedroom house, 2 ensuite, 2 garage, a sizable garden, walk-in wardrobe, whatever it is, then people can actually start understanding exactly, not only what you want, but how it'll cost, what materials are needed, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we have a template for creating project briefs, and you can contact us at Bhairav@atomcto.com and Sam at cto.com. atomcto.com, sorry, or go to our website atomcto.com, and we can send that to you. But I think that's the key. It is ensuring that you've got as much detail in there as possible, and you're not only just breaking down the background description of your business, but also what you're trying to achieve, the different components that are within what it is that you're trying to build. So, for example, if it's an app, okay, what do you need? What are the workflows? So you need user registration. For example, if it's Uber, you need to have a driver app, you need to have a rider app, you need to be able to select journeys, see past journeys, pay for things. All of these things need to be in that brief, and in as much detail as you can know right now, so that people can then go back and say, okay, these are the things that are possible, what's not possible, what will take a lot of time, and how much everything will cost.
Absolutely, and the RFP it should almost be a bit of a conversation starter as well, where it might not be that the document that you hand over is the be all and end all. There will be questions that come up because you cannot think of everything. So don't be worried if people ask questions. Yeah. Be worried if they don't ask questions.
Yeah, exactly. And also one thing to mention is there should be some non-functional requirements in there. So, how many users are you going to support? What kind of browsers do you want to support? If it's a mobile app, what kind of phones do you want to support, etc., versions of the operating systems, etc. So that's another important thing to do. Now, once you've put together a proposal, the question is, who do you send it to? So, in the past, Sam, when you've been working on things like this, how do you find the companies to send the proposal to?
It's a mixture of, and obviously you want to find the right company that fits the domain you're in, that fits the kind of technology space. So if you're using .NET or you want to do React, you need to make sure that they have experience in those. But yeah, it's a conversation. So either there'll be a company you've worked with in the past, which that can be one of the best ways. You have an established trust and lines of communication. You know how each other works. But sometimes, we have to go back to the drawing board and sit there, search through Google, LinkedIn, go to our network, and do a lot of research, talk to those people. And it's that same process of just vetting a company, have a conversation with them, look at what they've been building, look at what they've been doing, get an idea and a feel for their experience, and then kind of just listen to your gut. If you get a good feeling from this, hand them over an RFP. I think it's pretty common these days where people just fire out an RFP in a shotgun approach. They just send it out to a lot of people. And we've seen this a lot over the years. And the problem is that, it's a double-edged sword, because you want to get a few tenders for a quote. You never go with the first option. You want to always have 2 or 3 responses. But you have to choose those companies wisely by doing some vetting, because if you send it out to 20, pretty much all 20 will say they can do it. And now it's just looking at the cost of those. And if you just go for the cheapest bidder, you're probably not going to have a very good outcome. So it's just having that conversation, doing a bit of research and some due diligence, and try to target it a little bit more.
Yeah, and obviously coming to people like us, we've got our network of companies that we've worked with over the years that can do a number of different things and different technologies at different prices. So it's well worth finding someone like us that can actually help you select those people. And again, our network is global, so I'm not necessarily looking at just the UK, but we're looking at across the world to find the right people that have the experience that you would need as a business. So one of the things that I think has been interesting in all the years that we've been sending out RFPs is that oftentimes what you find when you're getting back the actual proposals, they are vastly different. And actually, our very first customer in the UK when I came back and we started Atom was a company, Project MVP. Those guys are great, and it was Matt who came to me and said, "Look, I'm lost. I've got 3 proposals. We put out this RFP. One proposal is for 20 grand, the other one is for 150 grand, and the one in the middle is for about 75 grand. Which one do I pick?" And it was a very, very interesting experience, because I had to look at what they sent out, and I had to look at what was brought back, and eventually we scrapped all of them because none of them made sense. And I think there wasn't the clarity of vision that they had when they were sending out the RFP, and we eventually kind of redid it, and they found the right partner. But I think that because there was so much ambiguity, not say ambiguity, but the requirements weren't so clearly defined, they ended up getting such a wide range of different bids. Now, so what is your experience around that? Do you find that when companies respond to RFPs that they tend to be aligned, or are they less aligned?
Yeah, it varies. It varies greatly, and exactly as you say, the interpretation of that RFP. So I've submitted responses. Obviously, we've responded to our own RFPs, and this could be like a $1 million contract. It's a huge contract. You submit an RFP, and the response you get back is like, you completely missed the point. So, well, no, we answered every question. But again, they weren't experienced enough in putting together and formulating those ideas, that the RFP itself was substandard. So now you're responding to something which actually wasn't at all what they wanted to hear. So that's why, again, it should be a bit of a conversation starter where rather than just firing out these documents and there's no other level of interaction, use it as a conversation starter, invite questions, invite that conversation, because as soon as those questions start to come in, you'll very quickly understand whether you yourself are on the right track with your request.
Yeah, and we're actually going through this with one of our companies at the moment. We're going through an RFP process, and what I'm obviously advising the client, and what I'm trying to get them to follow, which they are doing very well, is to ensure that you obviously have an initial conversation with the people that are bidding so that they can answer questions, but you don't keep having conversations with clients, because there's a couple of things in that. Firstly is not clients, I mean to say bidders. There's one thing in that any information you share with one bidder needs to be shared across multiple bidders to keep it fair and to keep it all to basically make sure that everyone's playing with the same deck of cards. But also it takes a lot of time, and if you send it out to 5 people and they all want 3 or 4 conversations, it's just a waste of your time. And really what you want is you want them to come back with an initial interpretation, and it's okay for them to send back a list of questions, or it's okay for them to send back a not necessarily a full proposal, but something in it that gives you an estimate of the time and cost involved and what they're thinking. Because not only does that give you an idea of how much detail they've gone into your bid, but it also gives you across the board an idea of, are there any common sticking points or any common areas of confusion? And what we're finding now, especially with this company, is that there is one area which is a big unknown, which we probably need to then go back and say, okay, in order for us to get better bids, we need to go and break this unknown piece down a little bit more. And I think that's important. It's obviously a process, but make sure you have a rigid process that you stick to, and you're not over kind of engaging with your bidders.
Absolutely. And for the bidders as well, I think there is also that balance where you need to treat it with respect, but don't go overboard, which that can be difficult. I mean, we have been involved in RFPs to some of the huge banks out in the world. I don't know if we can name their names, but there was 15 people working for 2 months on this RFP to provide information. That's a huge RFP, but it's a huge engagement. Similarly, if you're a smaller company who's trying to bid on something, you don't have those resources, you kind of need to make that call very early on where, am I out of my depth with this?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, there's a lot of companies that I've come across over the years who've actually stopped responding to RFPs simply because a lot of what they found is they got burnt. So they've gone back and given solutions, and those solutions have just been taken off and have ended up, in one example, a company I spoke to, they'd given a solution to a client. The client said, okay, thanks, we like what you've done. And what they ended up doing was taking their solution and finding someone cheaper to implement it, which is kind of harsh, but it happens. But of course, that's the dangers of doing business, right?
That's it. Some of these RFPs, I mean, they basically want you to design the system and discuss that in the RFP, which there is a danger to that because, depending on the company, you want to show that you're capable of doing this, but you don't want to basically hand over the entire project to the RFP because then they don't really need you to engage any further. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
So once, let's say you've done it through your vendor selection, what are the kind of things that you need to look out for when you're actually contracting with this end party? And of course, this could be like a podcast in itself, but give a few just kind of high level pointers to companies. Like, let's say you've engaged with someone, you like what they're doing, you want to go with them. What's the next steps? What do you think should be in that contract?
So I guess a lot of this is common sense, and a little bit of it is not so common sense. It's more of the legal side. So whatever you do, try to get some legal advice on this. Hopefully, most people who are submitting RFPs and engaging in these kind of contracts, you will have some legal consult that you can turn to get some advice, because you really just need to protect yourself coming into this. Now, how much time and effort you invest in that will depend on the size of the project. So if you're looking to just spend a few $1,000s or a few £1,000s on this, which is a relatively small project for you, you don't have to go crazy. It probably end up costing you more to get your lawyer in to look at everything. That's a little bit of overkill. But generally, the kind of projects that warrant an RFP will be more substantial. So you need to check everything, kick all of the tires, get as much advice as you can to make sure that you're protected. Make sure that everybody understands the deliverables, they understand the timelines, that you have buffer in, you have fallbacks in. What happens if halfway through the project, the company you're working with goes bust? And as you say, Bhairav, this is why we could probably do a whole conversation on this, but it's just really, again, it comes back to that. I think we've used the word due diligence a lot in these podcasts, but it's pretty much just that. Use your common sense, kick tires, make sure that everything is okay. If it warrants, get some legal advice, and really it just comes down to the contract, because if things do go wrong, that's what you're going to fall back on.
Yes, for sure. And I think so for me, the key areas are obviously keeping your IP, making sure you have access to the code. If there's delays, what can you do about it? And the delay bit is very important, because if you're time boxed, you need to ensure that if it slips by a month and therefore there's contingencies based on that, what can you do? What remedies do you have? And you need to even start looking at things like where you're able, a step-in clause, where if things are delayed by over X amount of time, you can have third parties step in to take over the work at the cost of the people who are delaying that project, right? Simply because it's important to you that you get delivered on time, especially if it's a time-sensitive thing. There are so many examples that we've seen out there. There's one recently where a company, it's a delivery company that came to us to ask us to help them develop to improve the set of apps. And I said to them, okay, can you send us the source code and we can take a look at what's there? And when they went back to the partner that created all of this, they found out that they didn't own any of the code. Even though they've been paying them month on month, they didn't actually own the code. So he wasn't able to send it to me, and we weren't able to reverse engineer any of it. And so these very simple things, very basic things need to be done in order to ensure protect your rights and protect your IP.
Absolutely. And things that aren't always obvious to you in the beginning. That's why you just have to reach out and don't be afraid to ask for help.
All right, Sam, I think that's covered, I think, all of the things that we want to talk about regarding proposals. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention to the listeners?
No, not that I can think of right now.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. And if you need to get in touch with us, my email address is bhairav@atomcto.com, Sam at atomcto.com, and you'll find us both on LinkedIn. Thanks a lot for that, Sam.
Thank you.